In this city, time stopped. Literally. In one of its bakeries, charred bread remains forever in the oven, never to be taken out. In the taverns, dishes sit on tables, waiting for patrons who will never arrive. On the walls of houses, graffiti remains, declarations of love, political slogans, and simple, everyday jokes. But what if I told you that the greatest threat to this ghost city came not from the volcano, but from the men who found it? This is the story of Pompeii, a story of how one of the greatest discoveries in history was almost destroyed by human greed, and how the battle for this legacy changed our relationship with the past forever. To understand the tragedy of Pompeii, one must first understand its life. It was a thriving, bustling port city, a Roman resort for the wealthy, and a commercial hub for everyone else. Imagine the hum of the crowd in the Forum, where deals were struck and justice was served, the sense of exotic spices mingling with the aroma of fresh bread from dozens of bakeries, the creak of cartwheels on the stone-paved streets, where deep ruts, carved over centuries, still tell the stories of ancient trade routes. On the walls, vibrant frescoes advertising services and crude graffiti left by legionaries. Life was buzzing. But towering over all this activity, silent and green, was Vesuvius. The Romans didn't even know it was a volcano. To them, it was just a mountain, covered in fertile vineyards that produced some of the best wine in the empire. They had no memory of the ancient, prehistoric eruptions that were many times more powerful than what was to come. They lived in blissful ignorance in the shadow of a sleeping monster. Let's delve deeper into this daily life to feel the pulse of this ancient city. Pompeii was founded in the 7th century BC as a settlement of the Oshi, an Italic people, and later became part of the Roman Empire after its conquest by Sulla in 80 BC. The city was planned on a classic Roman grid. Two main arteries, the Cardo and Decumanus, intersected at right angles, forming blocks or insulae where people of different classes lived. At its heart was the Forum, the center of public life. Here stood the Temple of Jupiter with its majestic columns, where sacrifices were made to the gods, and the Basilica, where judges settled disputes and merchants traded. Nearby was the market, or Macellum, with stalls for meat, fish, and vegetables. Archaeologists have even found the preserved remains of fish and fruit in the ash. The population was around 10 to 20,000 people. Roman citizens, freedmen, slaves, and visitors from Greece, Egypt, and even Africa. It was a true melting pot of the ancient world. Pompeii's economy thrived on its proximity to the sea and its fertile soil. The port, located at the mouth of the Sarno River, welcomed ships from Alexandria, Carthage, and Spain, bringing grain, olive oil, wine, and exotic goods like pepper, silk, and ivory. The locals exported the famous Pompeian wine, produced from grapes grown on the slopes of Vesuvius. It was so popular it was mentioned in the works of Pliny the Elder. The city had over 30 bakeries, where flour was ground in stone mills turned by donkeys or slaves. One such mechanism has been perfectly preserved, complete with hoofprints. Commerce was brisk. The streets were lined with thermopolia, snack bars that served hot dishes like lentil stew with sausage or wine sweetened with honey. Prices were fixed, and even menus have been found inscribed on the walls. For 1 ass, you can drink wine. For 2, you can drink the best. For 4, you can drink Falernian. Social life was vibrant and diverse. Wealthy patricians lived in domus-style houses with atriums, internal courtyards where rainwater was collected in an impluvium, and peristyles, gardens with fountains and statues. The frescoes on their walls depicted myths, Venus and Mars, Perseus and Andromeda, or even erotic scenes in the bedrooms. The poor were crowded into insulae, multi-story apartment buildings, similar to modern flats, with shops on the ground floor. The women of Pompeii were relatively independent. They owned businesses, like the priestess Eumachia, who funded the construction of a building for the Fullers' Guild. Slaves made up as much as a third of the population. Many were skilled artisans, blacksmiths, jewelers, or even teachers. Entertainment included the amphitheater,
which could seat 20,000 spectators for gladiatorial contests. In 59 AD, a massive brawl broke out here between Pompeians and Nucerians, described by Tacitus, which led to a 10-year ban on games.
Religion permeated everything. There were temples to Venus, Apollo, and Isis, an Egyptian goddess whose cult was popular among sailors. People wore amulets against the evil eye, often in the shape of a phallus, symbolizing fertility and good fortune. The graffiti on the walls is the social media of antiquity. Gaius was here, a soldier of the legion. Elections, vote for Vettius Firmus for aedile, he is a good baker. Or even insults and declarations of love like Secundus kisses all the girls. These inscriptions, written in vulgar Latin, show how common people spoke, with mistakes, slang, and humor. Life was full of contrasts. The luxury of the villas existed alongside brothels, or lupanaria, where the walls were decorated with erotic frescoes and prices for services were carved above the doors. But looming over this entire world was Vesuvius, a mountain 1,281 meters high, covered in dense forests and vineyards. The Romans called it Mount Vesuvius, but were unaware of its volcanic nature. The last major eruption had occurred in the Bronze Age, some 1,800 years prior, and the legends of it had faded. The soil around it was incredibly fertile thanks to past ash deposits. Here they grew olives, figs, pomegranates, and even exotic plants. Wine from Vesuvius was so aromatic it was exported throughout the empire. Pliny the Elder praised it in his Natural History. The residents ignored the warnings. Frequent earthquakes in Campania were considered normal, like the one in 62 AD that destroyed part of the city, but it was quickly rebuilt. They lived in an idyll, unaware that pressure, capable of destroying everything, was building beneath the earth. And then it awoke. The eruption of 79 AD is one of the most studied in the history of volcanology. It began on August 24th, or according to new evidence, in October, when Vesuvius, after centuries of dormancy, exploded with the force of 100,000 atomic bombs. Pliny the Younger, watching from Misenum, 30 kilometers away, described the column of ash as a pine tree with a spreading canopy. This plume rose to 33 kilometers, blocking out the sun, causing a night in the middle of the day. Then came a rain of pumice, light, porous stones that accumulated in a layer up to 2 to 3 meters thick. The residents had time to flee. Many grabbed their valuables, coins, jewelry, even food, and headed to the sea or to Stabii. Archaeologists have found skeletons with bags full of gold. About 90% of the population, 18,000 people, escaped, including, possibly, the wealthy owners of places like the Villa of the Mysteries, with its famous frescoes of Dionysian rituals. But for those who remained, hell ensued. Roofs collapsed under the weight of the pumice, burying people alive. Then, on the night of August 25th, came the pyroclastic flows, superheated waves of gas, ash, and rock, racing at 700 kilometers per hour at a temperature of 700 degrees Celsius. The first flow destroyed Herculaneum, the second Pompeii. Death was instantaneous. Bodies were vaporized, leaving voids in the ash. In the 1860s, Giuseppe Fiorelli filled these with plaster, creating 104 casts. A mother with her children, a dog in agony, a man covering his face. Analysis shows the victims were healthy, with excellent teeth thanks to a sugar-free diet. Among them were pregnant women, the elderly, and slaves. One cast, the multir, is of a slave with deformed legs from heavy labor. The eruption lasted 18 to 20 hours, covering the city in a 6-meter layer of ash, preserving it like a time capsule.
But even after this, the city did not immediately vanish from memory. The last mentions of Pompeii appear on 5th-century maps in the Tabula Peutingeriana, an ancient Roman road map. But with the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476, Europe plunged into the Dark Ages. Barbarian invasions, the plague of Justinian in 541 to 542, wars between Goths and Byzantines, The world was too busy surviving, with feudalism, monasteries, crusades, to remember buried cities. Pompeii became overgrown. Vineyards, olive groves, and even villages grew over the ruins. The hill above the city was called La Civita, the city, by locals, hinting at ancient legends. In the Middle Ages, canals were dug here, but any finds, coins, statues were attributed to ghosts or ignored. In 1592, everything changed. The architect Domenico Fontana, working for the Viceroy of Naples, was digging an aqueduct from the Sarno to Torre Annunziata. His workers stumbled upon walls, frescoes, and an inscription, De Curia Pompeiis, the Council of Pompeii. Fontana, who had fled Rome after a scandal involving an obelisk, he allegedly damaged it, saw not history but profit. He secretly removed marble and bronze, selling them on the black market to aristocrats. Some artifacts ended up in the collections of the Medici or the Vatican, but without context. Fontana sealed up his finds fearing publicity, and Pompeii was forgotten again for 150 years. It was an act of pure greed. In the Renaissance, antiquity was valued, but as trophies, not as science.
Time passed, and in the 18th century, with the Enlightenment, a thirst for ancient treasures swept Europe. Antiquity became high fashion, neoclassicism in art, the grand tour for aristocrats, travels through Italy to study ruins. In 1738, Herculaneum was found, under hard lava, which made excavations difficult. King Charles III of Bourbon hired Roque Jacob de Alcubierre, a Spanish military engineer. Alcubierre treated the excavations like a military operation. His men dug tunnels chaotically, like miners digging for gold. They cut out frescoes with knives, broke statues to carry away parts, heads, torsos. In 1748, they moved on to Pompeii. They found the theater, the temple of Isis, but with no system. Artifacts went to the Royal Museum in Partouchy, but many were destroyed. Tunnels collapsed, frescoes crumbled in the air. Alcubierre even burned indecent objects, like erotic lamps, for moral reasons. But even in the deepest darkness, a light can be ignited. Among the crew was Carl Jakob Weber, a Swiss engineer hired in 1750. Weber, educated in the spirit of the Enlightenment, saw not trophies in the ruins but history. He secretly documented everything. He measured buildings, drew plans, marked the location of artifacts. His maps are the first scientific documents of Pompeii. When an inscription reading Re Publicae Pompeianorum was found in 1763, the city was identified. Weber fought with Alcubierre, writing reports to the king. His ideas inspired Johann Winckelmann, the father of archaeology, who criticized the looting in his History of the Art of Antiquity. From 1755 to 1792, the Antiquities of Herculaneum were published, 8 volumes of engravings that spread knowledge across Europe. This put an end to the chaos. In 1806, under Napoleon, systematic excavations were introduced under Giuseppe Fiorelli, who divided the city into regions and introduced the plaster casts.
Now that we know how Pompeii was saved from its second death, let's return to the day of its first. Forget the paintings of people in light togas fleeing under a summer sun. Recent analysis of grapes, nuts, and clothing proves the catastrophe happened in the cold autumn of 79 AD, likely on October 24th. Heaters with charcoal are found in homes, and victims are wearing woolen cloaks, tunics, and even gloves. Emperor Titus had just ascended the throne after Vespasian, and the year was marked by omens, a comet, earthquakes. The eruption was not instantaneous. For days before, tremors, dry wells, a strange smell of sulfur. On October 24th, around 1 p.m., the explosion.
Magma that had accumulated for centuries erupted. The ash column, 33 kilometers high, with lightning from static electricity. Pumice fell for 18 hours, burying the streets. People hid in cellars, like in the Garden of the Fugitives, where 13 people died with branches for protection. Then, 6 pyroclastic flows, the first at 1 a.m. towards Herculaneum, incinerating 300 people on the beach. The fourth towards Pompeii at 7:30 a.m., destroying all life. The temperature caused vitrification, glass-like skulls from exploding brains. After, lahars, mud flows from the rains. Titus visited the site, allocated aid, but the city was forgotten. Archaeology today uses DNA. Victims were a mix of Italics, Greeks, Africans. One was Syrian, based on isotopes. So what did Pompeii give us besides a tragic story? It opened a window into the daily life of ancient Rome. Not the lives of emperors and generals, but of bakers with their mills, merchants with their scales, slaves with their collars, artists with their palettes. We saw their homes, the House of the Veti with its frescoes of Cupids, the House of the Faun with its mosaic of Alexander. Their food, carbonized figs, nuts, bread with poppy seeds. Their tools, surgical instruments in the House of the Surgeon, catheters, forceps. Even their jokes, beware of the dog, with a mosaic of a canine. We learned about hygiene, public toilets with running water, baths with a hypocaust, underfloor heating. But the greatest legacy of Pompeii is the lesson it taught us. It forced humanity to ask a new question, not what treasures can we take from the past, but what can we learn from it? It was in Pompeii that the idea was born that history is not a treasure to be plundered, but a fragile heritage to be carefully studied and preserved for future generations. The journey from Alcubierre's crude tunnel to modern technologies, CT scanning of scrolls from Herculaneum, AI for reconstructing frescoes, drones for mapping, began there, on the hill called the City. Today, Pompeii attracts 3 million tourists a year, but faces threats: erosion, vandalism, climate. New finds from the 2020s, a slave room with cots, a wedding chariot, and a fresco with a pizza, focaccia with fruit. They remind us the past teaches humility before nature and the value of knowledge. I would be grateful for any support. Leave a comment, subscribe, and hit the like button. It really helps the channel.